The following program is a podcast1.com production.
Your healthy radio addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Can't let go. No, I can't let go. I'm saying I can't let go.
That statement is a completely false statement. Whether or not Mr. Bennett knew of your relationship with Ms. Lewinsky, the statement that there was no sex of any kind, in any manner, shape, or form with President Clinton was an utterly false statement. Is that correct?
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is. Yes.
What are you doing? You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. That was all those years ago, 1998, 99. Saul Weisenberg questioning Bill Clinton about his relationship. And all these years later, he has an interview about the same exact issue. And just like 20 years ago, when he was Mr. Defiant, same deal when he sits down with NBC's Craig Melvin, and an interview that was supposed to be about his book, and he seems like he's absolutely gobsmacked that he's asked about this issue in the era of Me Too.
A lot of the facts have been conveniently omitted to make the story work. But I think partly because they're frustrated that they got all these serious allegations against the current occupant of the Oval Office, and his voters don't seem to care. I think I did the right thing. I defended the Constitution.
855-40-LAURA. The questions from Craig Melvin were the most interesting.
A few days ago, in response to critics who have suggested that you should have resigned in the wake of the Lewinsky scandal, you said that you should not have. If you were president now, in 2018, with everything that's going on with the Me Too movement, how would you have approached the accusations differently?
Well, I don't think it would be an issue because people would be using the facts instead of the imagined facts. If the facts were the same today, I wouldn't.
Wait. What? What facts are different? I've got to say, I was listening to this going, you've got to be kidding me. And of course, Craig Melvin doesn't say, which facts are you talking about? Which facts are, what?
Looking back on what happened then, through the lens of Me Too now, do you think differently or feel more responsibility?
No, I felt terrible then. And please. I came to grips with it.
Did you ever apologize to him?
No, yes, and nobody believes that I got out of that for free. I left the White House $16 million in debt.
Oh, really? Yeah.
But
$500,000 speeches.
Typically
pay that debt out
have ignored gaping facts in describing this, and I bet you don't even know them.
Well, why don't you tell us? What facts is he missing? You had a relationship with an intern in the Oval Office, at a room outside the Oval Office, and lied about it. And by the way, he pointed that same bony finger that he pointed all those years ago when he did the first press conference. The same bony finger pointed back at the media. Nothing's changed. Bill, he's the same old.
I want to say one thing to the American people. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
My mother was alive back then, and she said that finger. She said that bony finger is always pointing. When he points the fingers when he's lying, and his eyes get all narrow, and he did that in this interview yesterday. A
lot of the facts have been conveniently omitted.
Wait a second. Which facts? I'm amazed that actually an NBC reporter asked him about this. I'm amazed that he also didn't follow up and say, what facts are you referring to, Mr. President?
You are giving one side and omitting facts.
Mr. President, I'm not trying to present a side.
You asked me if I agreed. The answer is no, I don't.
And I asked if you'd ever apologized, and you said you had.
I have.
You've apologized to her.
I apologize to everybody in the world.
He's apologized to everybody in the world. He did not apologize to Monica Lewinsky personally. This is a woman, by the way, who in that Vanity Fair article a few months ago said that she had PTSD, which doesn't surprise me. She was 22 years old. And, it basically ruined her life. He went on to make millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And he almost got back into the White House. If it weren't for Donald Trump, that guy would have been back in the White House. Okay? So I keep thinking, it was on CBS Sunday Morning, thank you. I keep thinking, again, thank God for Trump. Now, Trump's no saint, perfect person, we know that. But when he keeps saying, well, today, if a Democrat were in power, there'd be a different outcome here.
Do you think that the press has been fair to President Trump?
I think they have tried, by and large, to cover this investigation based on the facts. I think if the roles were reversed, now this is me just talking about it based on my experience. If there were a Democratic president and these facts were present, most people I know in Washington believe impeachment hearings would have begun already. And most people I know believe that the press would have been that hard or harder. But these are serious issues.
Well, the relevant way to look at it, if you're going to do have a parallel analysis, would be if the Democrats controlled Congress. The Democrats controlled Congress, and there was a Democrat president, and all of this was involved. Do you think the Democrats would impeach a Democrat president? The answer is no, they wouldn't. But so it's a totally different deal. If Democrats were in charge now, they might have already impeached. He's right, but not if the Democrats were in control and the Democrat was in the White House. That's ridiculous. By the way, Craig Shirley is going to join us later on. A piece from Patty Davis, who is the daughter of Ronald Reagan, who's a big liberal. She wrote a piece saying her father would be horrified. It's the anniversary of Reagan's death tomorrow. And Craig Shirley is a renowned biographer. So we'll talk to him about whether Reagan would be ashamed of Trump's presidency. And Andy McCarthy is going to join us about this issue about whether the president has the ability. Again, another side issue that really doesn't matter here, but the press is going crazy and the president's tweeting about it, so we'll talk about it. Whether the president has an absolute right to pardon himself. Now, whether you have the right to do it and whether you should do it, in my view, are two different matters. And Giuliani yesterday addressed this on Meet the Press. And the Twitter sphere and cyberspace went crazy without fully reporting on what Giuliani said, the full context of what he said.
Does this mean he can terminate any federal investigation? Is that the argument here? Any federal investigation he can terminate?
Yeah. I mean, that is pretty clear. I mean, he's a presidential appointee. When I was a U.S. attorney, I had the power I was appointed by President Reagan. Nobody ever attempted to terminate an investigation. It would have probably been a scandal of immense proportions unless I was being an idiot. So that's a very unrealistic thing. But if you're asking in a theoretical sense, I mean, it could lead to impeachment. It could lead to, I mean, if he terminated an investigation of himself, it could lead to all sorts of consequences.
But constitutionally, you're making the argument. Could, is what you're saying.
I'm saying constitutionally, it sure looks that way. I haven't made that argument.
Right.
We don't have to make that argument.
So with that comment, which is, I think, very reasonable, they went nuts all day yesterday. It was just everywhere that basically Trump's going to pardon himself. Well, it's just, again, when you read the Constitution, it is clear that the president has an absolute pardon right. Now, whether politically that's a good idea, I think Rudy Giuliani hit the nail on the head. He'd probably get impeached. It looks bad. It looks ridiculous. But I swear, the president just wants to stick people in the eye. I mean, so this morning, he's out there saying, yeah, we have an absolute right to pardon myself. There were a lot of other things that he tweeted out as well, but as been stated by numerous legal scholars, I have the absolute right to pardon myself, but why would I do that when I have done nothing wrong? In the meantime, the never-ending witch hunt, led by 13 very angry and conflicted Democrats and others, continues into the midterms. I think the more he talks about, the more that his team talks about impeachment, the better for Republicans. The economic news that came out on Friday is just simply stunning. And today is the 500th day that the president has been in office. And the accomplishments in 500 days, just on the economic front, the White House was very good about getting this out yesterday. It's just, there's no other word except stunning, remarkable. 3 million jobs have been created since the president took office. 304,000 manufacturing jobs have been created since President Trump took office. 337,000 construction jobs. The unemployment rate has dropped to 3.8, the lowest since April 2000. 67% of Americans now believe that it's a good time to find a quality job. Americans received $3.2 trillion in gross tax cuts and saw the child tax cut double. Confidence in American economy, jobs returning from overseas, optimism among manufacturers has hit record highs under President Trump. Small business optimism has sustained record high levels under Trump. He's rolled back 6 regulations for every one added in the federal government. The top corporate tax rate, of course, lowered from 35% to 21%. Keystone Pipeline. We've freed up our energy sector. The Korean free trade deal has been renegotiated. He's on the way to resetting our trade relationship with China and with Mexico and Canada. They're kicking and screaming, but who has more power in this dynamic, the United States or Canada? Canada's going to have to give in. They will, too. Of course, we moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which other presidents had promised to do. And they never did. Donald Trump did it. Of course, rebuilding the military was a priority of President Trump. That's well underway. Reforming the VA was a priority for President Trump. It's well underway. He's gotten hostages released, of course, from North Korea. He has restored America's standing in the world. He has told Europe that they must begin to fund their own commitment to NATO, fully fund the 2%, 3% GDP contribution. He stared them down in Europe to do that. And he's managed to not only appoint, but get confirmed dozens of phenomenal judges to the federal courts. Both the district courts and the courts of appeals, as well as, of course, Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. 500 days in, if you would have told me the stock market would be up 7,000 points and we would be poised to have a quarter this year that would be 4.7% GDP, which is what Larry Kudlow and others are predicting, we haven't had that type of growth since the 1990s. I actually didn't predict this. I didn't predict it was going to be as good as this currently is. Now, things can change, but my goodness, with a resistance movement in place and with Republicans kind of still not wanting to believe that this is now a more economic nationalist party, man, he's still got a lot done. Also, repealing the individual mandate on Obamacare. 855-40-LAURA. 500 days in, how do you rate this administration? You can give him a letter grade. My letter grade is A-. Other than he hasn't gotten the wall funding yet. Omnibus spent too much money, but they're deporting a lot of these criminals, breaking up MS-13. African-American unemployment. I mean, this is good stuff. This is a great time to be a Republican and a great time to be running in the midterm election cycle. Don't go away.
Sorry seems to be the hardest word.
But you didn't apologize to her.
I have not talked to her.
Do you feel like you owe her an apology?
No, I do. I do not. I've never talked to her. But I did say publicly on more than one occasion that I was sorry. That's very different. The apology was public.
I'm very disappointed in those comments.
If you're one of the millions of Americans who suffer from muscle cramps in your legs or your feet, relief is finally in sight. TheraWorks Relief is a topical foam that's clinically proven to relieve muscle cramps fast. And with daily use, TheraWorks Relief can prevent muscle cramps before they even start. I recommend TheraWorks Relief to my family and friends, and the results speak for themselves. Now the word breakthrough gets tossed around easily these days, but TheraWorks Relief is the real deal. This is a life-changing product that, best of all, you don't even need a prescription for. TheraWorks Relief is my choice for preventing and relieving muscle cramps. Make it yours, too. Get TheraWorks Relief today at select CVS, Rite Aid, and Walgreens pharmacies, or at TheraWorksRelief.com. Talk to your pharmacist about TheraWorks Relief and experience relief from muscle cramps for yourself. That's TheraWorks Relief for your muscle cramps.
Stand by your man. Give him 2 arms to cling to.
This was litigated 20 years ago. 2/3 of the American people sided with me. They were not insensitive to that. I had a sexual harassment policy when I was governor in the 80s. I've had nothing but women leaders in my office since I left.
It just didn't seem as if the former president was prepared for these questions. How could he not be prepared going in for that?
Right, there could have been a more practiced answer, or one that I think alluded to the notion that the rules have changed in the past 20 years. They've changed in the past 20 months. And I think that he could have said something about that obviously the rules were different and that he would have done something perhaps differently today, or that he would say something differently about it today, but he hasn't been saying that in his interviews.
The most tepid of glancing criticism from CNN, Allison Camerata, today. Well, he could have had a more practiced answer. Well, how about the fact that he wouldn't do anything differently? That's the amazing thing. He wouldn't have done anything differently. And he doesn't think he owes her an apology. I mean, I have to hand it to CNN. At least on CNN.com, that's the headline. Thank goodness for Google searches this morning. That is the headline on CNN. Bill Clinton still doesn't think he has anything to apologize for. That's amazing. I've got to say, even though they didn't spend a long time on it, Mika Brzezinski today actually seemed, she seemed bothered by it.
That's the interview I think we've been waiting decades for. This is one of the key reasons why we have Trump today. That story, that president, his misdeeds, his mistakes with women, his abuse of power, and then his wife running for president and not facing what happened. And the continued abuse that happened under him, and the example he set for America's children about what is.
I mean, she's wrong about that's why Trump got elected. Obviously, Trump got elected because people were sick of the establishment running the country into the ground and keeping our borders open and doing these dumb trade deals. That's why people elected Trump. They wanted to throw all the bums out. It had nothing to do with the personal stuff. They were willing to overlook personal problems. The fact that he was married 2 times, the fact that the Billy Bush tape, they didn't look past all that because they wanted to save the country. That's why people elected Trump. But for her to actually say it was a gross abuse of power, remember, that's what Monica Lewinsky said just a few months ago.
Napa know-how.
Keeping it simple is usually a good thing. And when it comes to rewards programs, keeping it simple is always a good thing. That's why we made the Napa Rewards program effortless. All you need is your phone number to start saving on the parts and tools you need. Then we automatically give you $5 off your next purchase for every 100 you spend. So start saving today with Napa Rewards. Quality parts, helpful people. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.
I think that the president decided that he was going to pardon himself. I think that's almost self-executing impeachment. Whether or not there's a minor legal argument that some law professor somewhere in a legal journal can make that the president can pardon, that's not what the framers could have intended. That's not what the American people, I think, would be able to stand for.
He has no intention of pardoning himself, but he probably does. It doesn't say he can't. I mean, that's another really interesting constitutional argument. Can the president pardon himself?
You think it's an open
question? I used
question?
to run the pardon attorney. It would be an open question. I think it would probably get answered by, gosh, that's what the Constitution says, and if you want to change it, change it. But, yeah.
Oh, they're crazy, going crazy about this. The pardon power. Well, what does the Constitution say about the pardon power of the President of the United States? Is it qualified? Are there exceptions to the pardon power? Well, not that I can find. I mean, if you're a textualist and you believe in the text of the Constitution having supreme meaning, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution, the President shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. Does that mean he can't pardon presidents who've been impeached, or he can't pardon himself? Joining us now, Andy McCarthy, of course, National Review contributing editor, former assistant U.S. attorney, Southern District of New York. Andy, great to have you with us. What of this pardon-orama controversy of the last few days?
Well, Laura, I think you've just sort of hit the nail on the head with reading from the pardon clause. If we're going to discuss this as a real legal issue, then the president can pardon himself. There's nothing in the Constitution that says he can't do it. Moreover, the passage you just read, that the pardon power does not extend to cases of impeachment, strongly suggests that the framers understood that they were contemplating a situation where the president would pardon himself. And what they said was, you can't pardon yourself from impeachment, but you can pardon anything else as long as it's a federal offense. Now, the pardon power is like every other executive power, which means it can be abused.
Yeah, right.
And if Congress decides that it's being abused or it has been abused, they can impeach the president. But to say that he can't pardon himself, I just think is foolish. There's nothing in the Constitution that suggests otherwise, and in fact, it suggests just the opposite.
And Rudy Giuliani said, look, this could lead to impeachment if he pardoned himself. I mean, he actually made the affirmative point that to do so would be unwise, but he says, we're not going to have to get there. We don't believe we're going to have to get to this point. But then they made it out to be like Rudy Giuliani's on the verge of saying the president is going to pardon himself like tomorrow. I mean, it's crazy.
I just think that, the president does this from time to time. He actually raised this issue back in late July, and I wrote a piece about exactly what we're just talking about, that, clearly he can pardon himself, but that there was no point in talking about it because, as he pointed out then and as he continues to point out, there doesn't appear to be any crime that he's complicit in. So the whole discussion is, on a legal standpoint, it's premature, but the way Trump does things, I think it's right up his alley, which is to say, we had this whole idea of how the week was going to go, right? And Trump tweets this thing out first thing Monday morning, and we're going to spend the next 2 days on pardons. It's unbelievable.
The Michael Flynn, case has gotten some attention recently because of what the president and his team believed at the time of Flynn when he was interviewed by the FBI agents, and it seemed to them that there was no issue with Flynn, that in any investigation of Flynn had been closed out. I think it was Byron's piece that he published last night about this, and he said, well, look, there's no issue with the president and his team or the president himself telling Comey, I hope you can see your way to, let this go, when they had the belief that it already was pretty much wrapped up. And that confirms what Comey said to Congress. And he said the agents didn't believe that he had lied in that interview, that where he didn't have counsel present and he just voluntarily agreed to talk to the FBI agents. What do you make of that? It seems like they're already testing out some of these anti-obstruction of justice defenses.
Yeah, well, I think that I've always thought the Flynn thing was a concoction and much ado about nothing. I mean, from their standpoint, I suppose what they would say is if Trump didn't think there was any Flynn investigation to be concerned about, then why raise it with Comey at all? But as far as I'm concerned, the lowliest prosecutor in the United States every single day weighs whether somebody should be prosecuted or not, including in cases where the person is clearly guilty. So you exercise prosecutorial discretion. When a prosecutor does that, he exercises the president's power. He doesn't have his own power. This is an executive power that's reposed in the president. So to say that the president can't do what the lowliest prosecutor does every day is absurd. And what I point out to people is all he did was express his opinion. He didn't direct Comey to drop the case. If he had directed Comey to drop the case, that would have been okay because he had the constitutional power to do it. And the case was not remotely obstructed. In the end, Flynn was prosecuted. So what are we talking about? I just don't. I haven't gotten that one from the beginning.
No, and apparently Don McGahn, in a memo to his file that I think they must have leaked out, the White House must have given this to Byron, I would imagine, or I mean, it seems like they must have given it to Byron York for him to have this, but apparently McGahn said to the Yates people, look, we don't want to do anything that hampers your investigation, but, I mean, do you think we can talk about this? And they said, well, you can go ahead and talk about it.
Right.
And so, again, he actually said, we don't want to do anything to hamper the investigation. If we, end up, they were, obviously thinking of terminating him.
Right.
But, I mean, again, it just, this whole idea of obstruction because, he wanted to ultimately fire Comey or, part of the firing Flynn stuff. It's just ridiculous. None of this adds up to me. It's never added up to me either, Andy.
No, I think, Laura, this is all about the idea that Trump has to have a minder, right? Because if a president commits an illegal act like Nixon or Clinton in the nature of suborning perjury or tampering with witnesses, then sure, you can investigate the president for obstruction. But if the president commits legal acts that are within his constitutional prerogatives, then they're legal acts. And Mueller, who is just an inferior executive officer, has no place questioning whether the president's motivations or intent somehow corrupt legal acts that the president's allowed to take. So basically, they've tried to come up with a theory of obstruction that can check even Trump's legal exercises of his authority on the theory that he's not fit to be president and he needs someone like Mueller to be checking him.
Yeah, and so the letter that Trump's lawyers, it was a 20-page letter that they sent to the special counsel, the New York Times got a copy of it, contends that the president cannot illegally obstruct any aspect of the investigation into Russia's election meddling because the Constitution empowers him to, if he wished, terminate the inquiry or even exercise his power to pardon. So Giuliani obviously was expanding on that. And the New York Times, of course, says that this is a brash assertion of sweeping Article 1 power. What of that?
Well, I think for the most part, it's a statement of Article 2 fact. I mean, the president runs the executive branch, and he can shut down these investigations.
Excuse me, Article 2. Thank you. I got my articles mixed up.
I think we all know from experience that Nixon and Clinton prove that the president can be cited for obstruction based on illegal acts, but it's important to take note of the fact that those were impeachment proceedings, and Mueller is not Congress. Congress can impeach the president without having to find a statutory offense. They don't have to make out all of the elements that a prosecutor would have to make out in an obstruction case. So, I think it's pretty clear that the check that's intended by the framers on the president is impeachment. I mean, if you think about it, we had no Justice Department until 1870, and we had no FBI until 1908. So the framers didn't contemplate Robert Mueller. What they contemplated was if the president exceeded his authority in a way that was egregious and was an abuse of power, that the Congress would remove him.
Well, so Jack Goldsmith, you probably know Jack. He went to UVA with me, law school. He said, we don't know what the law is on the intersection between the obstruction statutes and the president exercising his constitutional power to supervise an investigation into the Justice Department. And he said, it's an open question.
Yeah, well, I don't agree with Jack that every question is an open question just because it hasn't been litigated. Like, for example, if a 34-year-old guy wanted to run for president, I think we can safely say that can't happen, even though it's never happened before, because the Constitution says it can't. And, if Jack was someone who thinks like he does, and I don't want to cast aspersions at him because I haven't seen his whole developed argument, but, if the Constitution says X, then I don't think it's appropriate to say, well, we don't know if X is the case because we've never litigated it. I think we can safely rely on what the Constitution says.
So what happens if Mueller decides to subpoena the president to testify? It seems, right, that Emmett Flood is preparing a series of defenses and challenges to that in court. Right. Where would that go? That would go to federal district court in D.C., or would it go right to the Supreme Court? Where would it go?
I think it would go right to the federal district court, and I think that's the reason why Mueller set up shop in Washington compared to other places he could have. He's got a pretty friendly bench there. But I think it's important to realize, Laura, that the whole reason we're going through this is because of politics. It's really not because of the law. If this was just a simple legal issue, Trump is the chief executive, and Mueller is a fairly low level. He's not even an appointed position. He's an inferior executive officer. If Trump were to say to Mueller, I direct you not to subpoena me, I don't know on what authority Mueller flouts that. But we will go through the court proceeding because I think the politics of this is that Trump doesn't feel he can take that step safely. But I think he could. As a matter of constitutional law, I don't see how an inferior executive officer
can force the president to testify.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just to me it seems beyond obvious, but it's going to end up at the Supreme Court. If this is really where this is going, this will end up at the court, in my view. It has to. It's a case of unique posture.
I think you're right, because I think Mueller expects that the way the federal bench is constituted in the District of Columbia, he's got a good shot to win there, even if he's wrong. And then, the D.C. Circuit swung pretty hard to the left under Obama. Yeah. So ultimately, we could end up there. We shouldn't, but we could.
Yeah, exactly. It's about politics here. Andy McCarthy is completely right. Andy, thank you so much, as always. We'll love having you on the Ingraham Angle, too, on Fox. You're the best legal analysis out there. We're going to take a break. 855-40-LAURA. Supreme Court handing down opinions today. We'll bring you the latest on that, some high-stakes cases, a lot more to get to. Don't go away. You are listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. It really is something that we see the same people who missed the rise of Trump and the Trump victory in 2016, predicted Hillary, predicted after Trump won that the markets would crater and all this. It's amazing that they still don't get it. They think that every new legal move by Mueller is going to bring Trump's numbers down, or people are going to be less optimistic or going to be really anxious to get rid of him. I think the Democrats are misplaying this hand. I really do. I think Trump is on the ballot everywhere. And I think that's a good thing. How are Democrats arguing that they're going to bring us to, 4.7% gross domestic product next quarter, which is what's being forecast? How are they going to bring us to record low unemployment for African Americans? How? Small business confidence? How are they going to do that? The answer is they have no answers. That's why it's all about personality and Mueller, etc. They have no solutions. They're out of ideas. All year, I've been letting my audience know about an ongoing war against cash by big government, and it's designed to control your money and your privacy. Recent reports confirm that this war is expanding rapidly, and time is running out to take action. I don't want any of my listeners to fall victim. Thankfully, the folks at Swiss America have detailed all the government's dirty little secrets in their revised report called The Secret War on Cash, Part 2. It's available free to you right now by calling 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. This is an important report that documents real-life events, such as banks refusing to cash checks, cash being confiscated from innocent citizens, and much more. Discover how to win the battle for your hard-earned savings. For your free copy of The Secret War on Cash, Part 2, call now. 800-289-2646. Again, the number, 800-289-2646.
Your healthy radio addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Searching for the time that has gone so fast. The time that I thought would last. My ever-present past.
If the unlikely event happens and Trump wins, you will see a market crash of historic proportions, I think.
Then there's the uncertainty of the election. I mean, I have my Trump hedge on. In the event Donald wins, I have no doubt in my mind the market tanks.
Mark Cuban, all these people, Paul Krugman, Larry Summers. Larry Summers said within 18 months we'll have a massive recession. Okay, so we're about 18 months in right now, right? Almost. So I guess we have to wait until August. Oh no, July to be. Was it July 20th, June 20th, whatever. 6 months in, 18 months. Okay. The market is up 7,000 points. We are on a course to have 4.7% domestic growth. The year could end up being one of the best years we've had in the last 20 for the U.S. economy. Now, if these tariffs were such a big problem for global markets, for the U.S., well, why do you think the U.S. stock market is Friday and today? And now that Trump said I wasn't kidding about the tariffs, you all thought I was just kidding. Guess what? I'm not kidding. Market's up almost 200 points, was up about 200 on Friday. Think about it this way. We have $20 billion of, I think, steel and aluminum come into the United States every year. We have a $20 trillion economy. So it's like a blip effect on our economy. It's not going to have any effect on our economy. And we've tried everything else. We've tried just, letting these trade deals kind of just roll on. We've tried, continuing to hope that China lives up to its obligations under the WTO, that even when they get a judgment against them at the World Trade Court, that they actually change their ways. We've tried all that. We did. We tried in earnest to get this, see if this all would work. China would become freer, and China would become friendlier, and China would become more Western in a way that welcomed free thought and free expression, free association, freedom of religion. human rights abuses would wane, and instead, China just became more powerful. And now we have a president for life in China with Xi. And so while all these people worried about Russia and so forth, Russia's economy has contracted. China's has expanded in ways that, I don't think Alan Greenspan and Bill Clinton back in 2000 or George Bush in 2001, he wasn't worried about China. They were welcoming China into the WTO. They all thought permanent trade relation status with China was great. They all thought that bringing China into the global marketplace, global trading relationships was going to be fantastic. Well, we lost 6 million manufacturing jobs. We sent innumerable factories over to Asia because, look, if companies can pay less in wages, they'll do it. And so they did it. And they sent, and we know what happened in especially the old Rust Belt. These jobs left, wages stagnated, and with the exception of a few years in the 1990s, we've never seen the type of optimism that we're seeing today in the small business, medium-sized business, energy sector, healthcare industry, manufacturing. It's unbelievable. I have to say, for all the hopes I had for Trump, I never thought it was going to be this good 500 days in. Never. Even the New York Times was out of words. They basically said Friday, it's hard to describe how remarkable these results are. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what the New York Times had to admit. And Trump has the highest approval rating among members of his own party, except for George W. Bush after 9/11 since World War II. I tweeted this out yesterday. Axios has a good report on this. So 87% of Republicans support President Trump. After 9/11, it was 96% of George W. Bush. That was after 9/11, 500 days in. But 87% support Trump. And you think they're going to want to, let's impeach Trump. Let's not show up in November. What? Of course they're going to show up in November. I'm telling you, the more Mueller pushes this, the better for Trump. I know that seems counterintuitive, but the more he pushes, the better for Trump. This is ridiculous. This investigation has been absurd from the beginning. The Michael Flynn stuff was ridiculous. He did not lie to those agents. The agents knew it at the time and told Comey as much. Comey tells Congress, and then suddenly Mike Flynn is gone because he lied to Pence. It's crazy. And then Trump has the power to fire Comey for whatever reason he wants to fire Comey. He can't obstruct something that wasn't happening. Trump wasn't a target of the investigation. What was he obstructing? And there's an argument about whether the president can't even obstruct an investigation. When there is no clear investigation, or the investigation itself was started under either unconstitutional grounds or spurious grounds, or Trump was told he wasn't a target by Comey, but he obstructed an investigation by firing Comey. Well, okay. 855-40-LAURA. 500 days in, how do you rate this presidency? I give him an A-. That's only because I'm a tough grader. I'm a tough grader, though. If I were a teacher, I'd be giving very few A's out. I don't like these teachers that give everybody an A. I don't. I mean, if obviously it's multiple choice and you have no choice, someone has to get an A. But on essays and so forth, all these teachers giving A's, no. But I'm telling you, when the New York Times is out of words to describe how incredible this economy is, then you know it's good. And are we ever going to go back to people like Larry Summers and Mark Cuban and all? I got to get Mark Cuban on the Ingraham angle. I got to get him on the Ingraham angle if he'll come on and say, okay, explain this. You all said that Donald Trump was going to crater this economy. It was all going to tank. To even talk of tariffs was going to be a disaster. Well, now the tariffs are going forward. The market's up 300 points, 400 points almost in the 2 days that we've known that the tariffs are going to go in place. 25% tariff on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods. European steel and aluminum tariffs, unless they work with us on this trade deficit that we have with them, remove barriers to entry for U.S. automobiles in Germany. They will not budge. Okay, we'll see how it goes for Germany, I guess. Who do you think is going to win a trade war with Canada or the United States? Who's going to win that? We are. Trump is doing the only thing he can do now. And I say it is about time. Countries have to know that we will not be taken advantage of any longer. He told them that regarding the NATO contributions to the military, that these countries had been remiss in providing, living up to their obligations. He stared them down in Europe, and he said, it's time to pay up. We're not going to carry the load for you. And Merkel said, she finally got the memo. Okay, so they finally got the memo on that. And, what do they think? That Macron's going to bring Trump to a military parade? Trump's going to have a state dinner for Macron, and Trump's going to say, okay, I'm not doing the tariffs anymore? Remember just a few months ago, the media were all predicting that Trump wasn't going to go through on the tariffs? He was not going to go through with them. He was not a man of his word. Now he's gone through with them. Now they're complaining he's gone through with them. I'm telling you, we're going to see. I think we're going to look back on this period. Because Trump, if this keeps going the way I think it's going to go, Trump's going to not only win in 2020, he's going to win by a bigger margin, having expanded his base. He's not just happy with keeping the base. Trump doesn't want to just have the base election. No. He wants to grow this movement. Why do you think he's talking about the African American unemployment as frequently as he's talking about it? Because the Republican Party is the rightful place for African American voters. If they open their mind to what is possible under this new economic nationalist view of running this economy, putting the right tax laws in place, continuing to pare down the federal workforce, 23,000 federal jobs are off the payroll under the Trump administration in 500 days. 23,000. That's amazing. George in Pennsylvania, line 1. George.
Hey, Laura, longtime listener. Great to be on your show. I think Trump's doing a fabulous job here in these first 500 days. I mean, and then, for the folks that want to just down him, they're going to down, like you said, they're going to down him no matter what he says. I mean, he can't do anything right. So if they're haters, there's always going to be haters. But I think he's doing a great job. I mean, just look around. The economy's booming. Our presence overseas. Our presence overseas, being a retired military guy, I mean, I'm loving it. I love what he has done for the country, and I think he's doing a great job. And I think you're right. He's gonna win by a huge margin in 2020.
Well, I think they actually know that this is working. What Trump is doing is actually working. He told them it would work. Now, he hasn't been able to do everything, but it's only 500 days in. Imagine if he had a Congress that was really capable of enacting the legislation that is necessary and still wasn't bought off by so much in the way of special interests. Imagine if he had that. Imagine if he didn't have the Mueller investigation. I mean, Lord knows what he would have accomplished. Coming up in September is the government will run on a money deal again. That's in September. It's always until the end of the fiscal year. That's going to be the next big, let's see if Trump follows through on what he said he was going to do, that he ain't going to fund the government unless he gets his wall funding. I wouldn't play chicken with Trump on that. I would not play chicken. And people say, that would be bad for the midterm elections. I don't think so. See, I reject the conventional wisdom about the government shutdown. I reject the conventional wisdom about tariffs. Watch what happens with Canada and Europe with these tariffs. Just watch. Watch what they do. They will buckle. They will absolutely buckle. They're going to show a tough face, and Trump will give them a way to save face. But watch what they do. They desperately need the U.S. market. They have to have the U.S. market. And they're going to have to remove barriers to entry and trade, onerous trade barriers to U.S. companies who want to sell in their countries. They just have to. You can't charge us 25% on the same goods that you send into our country that we charge 2%. You can't do that. It's just not going to work. It's not going to work for us. Trump said not doing it. So I think the Democrats know this is working. What are they going to do in 2020? What are they going to argue? Well, we would have had 8% GDP. Okay, how? Because you had a guy in there for 8 years. He didn't even get to 3% GDP. So you tell me what policies you would have put in place that would have brought us to this historic high GDP and this historic confidence and optimism in the U.S. economy. You tell me. Give me 3 policies that you enact that would drive this economy to these heights that Trump did. Now give us the 3. I'm telling you they wouldn't be able to do it. They have no answers. They have no solutions. All they have is their puffery and their condemnation of Trump the man. And it's the same old, but they have no solutions. They're out of the solutions business. So this is great for the country, and it happens to be great for the Republican Party if the Republican Party gets the message. Now, I just read that Senator Corker, outgoing Senator Corker, is going to approach the president with other Republican senators saying no to tariffs. Now, these are the same people who presided over the rise of China's military economy and massive trade deficits with their stupid reliance on these trade deals. And Trump's going to listen to them? Corker? Corker couldn't probably get reelected today. I mean, Flake couldn't get reelected. He's another senator against the tariffs. So these guys couldn't win a single state, probably, even their home state, against Donald Trump in a presidential primary cycle. And Trump's going to listen to them? Mr. President, stand firm. 855-40-LAURA. How do you grade the first 500 days? A to F. And if you're calling in to say F, you're just doing that to annoy me. Don't go away.
This is truly an exciting time for our country. Jobs are booming. Remember? I told you.
There's going to be a blue wave. There's no question about that. I don't know how large the wave is going to be.
I would predict today we're closer to a red wave than a blue wave in terms of the fall campaign. I think we have a chance to do surprisingly well in the House, maybe become the third time in a century that a presidential party actually gains seats.
Well, is Newt Gingrich right there? This could be the opposite of a blue wave. Well, I said from the very beginning, the same people who did not call the presidential election were predicting all along that Donald Trump would crash and burn and he would drag the party down in 2018. It's the economy, stupid. The economy is sailing. I guess if everything crashes, which there is no indication out there that we should see some major crash of the U.S. economy. There's just not. That's why the New York Times had to write that piece that it wrote on Friday, because they said this could be one of the great boom times in America, period, because of the indicators, the broad-based indicators on the horizon are all good here. Now, it's not going to go up forever, but if we keep these fundamentals in place and continue to support policies that redound to the benefit of the American worker, in 25 years, we could be looking back on this period as the period that basically rescued the Republican Party. Like we look back on Reagan, that this could just be it. Now we see what worked, and a complete reorientation of politics. It's amazing. It really is. I mean, the only other time I can think of it is, obviously my lifetime is Reagan. The Supreme Court ruled, in a very strange ruling, for that baker who did not want to make the wedding cake for the same-sex couples, a very narrow ruling. He sided with the baker, but giving very little guidance to the lower courts on how to determine whether an activity is expression under the First Amendment of the Constitution. So if his religious liberty is impacted, his creative expression, it's very difficult to determine. And of course, this is what the court's going to do. They never want to do anything that makes things clear. That you can't subject gay people to indignities while they seek out goods or services. Again, very little guidance to the lower courts. Craig Shirley's going to join us. The Reagan biographer Patty Davis is responding to what she thinks her father would think, Ronald Reagan would think about this president in this country today. Don't go away. If you're one of the millions of Americans who suffer from muscle cramps in your legs or your feet, relief is finally in sight. TheraWorks Relief is a topical foam that's clinically proven to relieve muscle cramps fast. And with daily use, TheraWorks Relief can prevent muscle cramps before they even start. I recommend TheraWorks Relief to my family and friends, and the results speak for themselves. Now the word breakthrough gets tossed around easily these days, but TheraWorks Relief is the real deal. This is a life-changing product that, best of all, you don't even need a prescription for. TheraWorks Relief is my choice for preventing and relieving muscle cramps. Make it yours, too. Get TheraWorks Relief today at select CVS, Rite Aid, and Walgreens pharmacies, or at TheraWorksRelief.com. Talk to your pharmacist about TheraWorks Relief and experience relief from muscle cramps for yourself. That's TheraWorks Relief for your muscle cramps.
A little bit of Monica in my life, a little bit of Erica by my side, a little bit of Rita's all I need.
And you don't think a private apology is owed?
I think this thing it's 20 years ago. Come on, let's talk about JFK. Let's talk about, LBJ. Stop already.
I don't think you think President Kennedy should have resigned? Do you believe President Johnson should have resigned? Someone should ask you these questions because of the way you formulate the questions. I dealt with it 20 years ago plus, and the American people, 2/3 of them stayed with me. And I've tried to do a good job since then with my life and with my work. That's all I have to say to you.
Jump up and down and move it all around. Shake your hand to the
Let's move on. Let's move on. Because I'm sure these people aren't going to be asking Trump in 20 years about anything personal. Oh, no, they're not going to be asking about the Mueller investigation. None of that will be asked. You're listening to The Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. This is wild. This really is a wild time. When, I'm telling you, when the New York Times has to admit that we live in a time with a remarkable economy, number one, that Europe is finally understanding that it's the free ride is over, NATO free ride, the trade, inequalities, it's not going to continue. We have a president who's not going to stand for it any longer. It's an amazing time if you're a minority in this country and you're tired of having your jobs either lost to being sent overseas, manufacturing jobs, or first-time entrance into the workforce, you're finding yourself, beat out by illegal immigrants. We have a president doing something about that. We have a president doing something about the menace of North Korea, the menace of Iran, the absurd NAFTA deal that we were warned about 20 plus years ago by that little guy, Ross Perot, the giant sucking sound. He was right. Yeah. I mean, I hate the word suck, but it really wasn't a good deal for us. And we know why now. I mean, all of this has been proven beyond dispute. So now we'll see if we can renegotiate that. If not, we'll just have to have bilateral deals when we can.
Since day one, the story of the Trump administration has been one of chaos and turmoil. This creates uncertainty that threatens the progress of our economy and the opportunities available to all American households.
Well, when did Maxine Waters say that? When was that? Okay, so it was all going to be... Everything was going to be bad under Trump. Do you see how none of these... You never have to go back to any of these people? That's why people like Steve Schmidt and the rest are just left... twiddling their thumbs in a corner, drooling on themselves with they're getting increasingly angry. You get that sense too, right? They're getting increasingly angry that things are going well in the country. That's hilarious. It's hilarious and it's pathetic. So now it's, well, John McCain is the greatest thing ever, and John, you can't say anything negative about... Okay, fine, good. Okay, great, fine. We can't ever criticize John McCain. Okay, now what? Now tell us how bad the country is under Trump. It's ridiculous. I asked you all to grade President Trump 500 days in. I gave him an A- because I'm a hard grader. But I don't see how you really could have had a much better first 500 days, except for the Mueller stuff, and maybe he tweets too much. But that's just not going to change. It's like saying that, oh, I wish the sky wasn't blue. The sky's blue. He's going to tweet. Okay, so I've just worrying about I'm not worrying about the tweeting. Craig Shirley, Reagan biographer extraordinaire, historian. He's going to join us now to talk about, where we are with these historical references. And the anniversary of Reagan's death is tomorrow. Hard to believe. And Patty Davis, daughter of President Reagan, wrote a piece in the Washington Post, and it's called Mourning America: What My Father, Ronald Reagan, Would Say Today. And he would be 107 years old. And other times she says, I simply say he'd be pretty horrified at where we've come to. But as the June 5th anniversary of his death has drawn near, I let myself imagine what he would say to the country he loved so much. And she goes on to say that he would plead with Americans to recognize that the caustic, destructive language emanating from our current president is sullying the dream that America once was. And she specifically mentions immigrants coming here for a better life, that his relatives, his ancestors came from Ireland, and that President Reagan would think that this tone and this attitude on the part of President Trump would be just looked down upon and reviled by her dad. Joining us now is Craig Shirley. Craig, it's a long-winded way of introducing you, but
hi, Laura.
Hi. What do you make about?
Where do I start?
This? Yeah. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, the elites have to feel very, very foolish, because everything they predicted, whether the economy or foreign policy or Trump's impeachment, none of it's come true. It's really astonishing. And they keep going on the same shows and making the same, fraudulent predictions, but they never there's never any accounting, is there? It never said, well, 6 months ago you said President Trump, but it didn't come true. It is that, we should grade, what you should do is grade their performance.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Grade their performance over the last 6 months or last year. Don't grade Trump's performance. Grade their performance on being wrong all the time.
Yeah, I mean they still get it wrong. They still keep predicting things like, well, he's not going to.
They still keep getting invited back.
Yeah, he's not going to follow through on his tariffs. He's just bluffing. He's going to start World War III with the Rocket Man language.
The stock market is going to crash. The economy is going to tank.
Right.
He's going to be impeached.
I mean, and they've been saying that the tariffs are going to bring down our economy, and since the tariffs were announced, we have almost a 400-point increase in the market. I think it's already built into the market.
Yeah, this is not the 1929 economy when Smoot-Hawley, brought about much of the Great Depression. The trade policies then. What he's talking about is a pinprick. What is it? A $20 trillion economy now?
No, it's so $20 billion in aluminum and steel imports, and a $20 trillion economy is like nothing.
Yeah, it's nothing. It's eyewash.
So the Reagan anniversary, it's hard to believe, isn't it?
14 years. You remember where you and I were 14 years ago?
Yep.
We bumped into each other outside the National Cathedral.
Yeah, I was... we were all so broken up because that was our youth. We were saying goodbye officially, even though not that we were young, but we were saying goodbye to that era.
In the 80s, we were young.
Yeah, we were young in the 80s, and we, it was all a rite of passage, and he was someone who would never have again as president, someone like him. That era is gone in America. Yeah. But Patty Davis writes a piece that seems pretty gratuitous to me. I mean, she's a big lefty.
And shame on the Washington Post, but this is so typical of the Washington Post. They love running pieces by people who are supposedly in the know, trashing people they don't like. On Valentine's Day they write about double murders of lovers, and on Mother's Day they write about lesbian mothers, and they love these counterintuitive pieces, especially when they're against Republicans or conservatives.
She writes, countries can be splintered from within, he would say, It's a sinister form of destruction that can happen gradually if we don't realize that our Constitution will protect us only if the principles of that document are adhered to and defended. He would be appalled and heartbroken at a Congress that refuses to stand up to a president who does not only who only seems ignorant of the Constitution, but who also attempts at every turn to dismantle and mock our system of checks and balances. That's quite a mouthful.
How would Patty know? Look, she dismissed her father so much she wouldn't even take his last name. Is that she's not Patty Reagan, she's Patty Davis. Is that during the 80s, is that she wrote Homefront, which was a novel which was an utter trashing of her mother and father. Then she wrote another bad novel called The Way I See It. It was another utter trashing of her mother and father. She posed nude for Playboy during the 80s, during his presidency. Is that she went out of her way to dismiss or disregard or attack her father and his policies all during the 1980s. So it's a little thin gruel for her to say now what Reagan's policies would be and how Trump is not adhering to them.
Well, I know you won't say it because you're a biographer, but I'm just looking at the situation as I think, and maybe more of an analyst. But to me, it's just she's using her dad's anniversary death as just a cheap way to go after Trump. That's it.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, why not write this 6 months ago then?
Well, that's right. But also look at the piece. It's shot through with first-person pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
I, me, my, not. If it was about Reagan, then she'd write about Reagan, but she's writing about her own opinion.
Right. He had a reverence and a love for America that burned in his eyes when he looked at the flag, that bled into his words when he... This is just bad writing. I mean, this is really bad writing. I'm sorry. It's really... It's not good. So, Craig, when you look at the first 500 days here, with all of the hyperbole and the tweets and the unnecessary, some of the wounds were self-inflicted. It is pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing, and nobody would have said 500 days ago that we'd be where we are 500 days hence. Nobody in the world, except the most optimistic supporter, but certainly none of the intelligentsia, none of the liberal elites, not Meet the Press or any of the MSNBC shows would have ever said of this. And it's got to be very, very frustrating for them to see the constant successes, foreign policy and domestic policy of Donald Trump. I've been as skeptical as anybody, but I would say, look, I would parse this. I wouldn't just say an A or B or C or whatever. I would say great on foreign policy, great on domestic policy, great on the presidency itself. On the economy, you have to give an A. The Republican policies work. They worked in the 50s, they worked in the 80s, and they're working again. Only they're just working much better, even better now than they did in, say, like the 1950s. But then during Calvin Coolidge's time, we had great prosperity too. And then from the time from Abraham Lincoln through Woodrow Wilson, there was great prosperity. So conservative policies work. We know it. It's been proven over and over and over again. And Trump's proving it again. He's just putting it into action. But I would give him an A on the economy. Give him a A- on foreign policy. I wish he was more reverential about the presidency. I wish he would read more. I wish he would tweet less. But that's just a fact. So on that stuff, I would say it's too early to say. Let's see how he, after 4 years, his reverence for the presidency. I think it will grow.
I think he's not going to ever be, Reagan. Nobody is, and he's and I think what most people think is, okay, like, would we want a guy who's, quote, really presidential over a guy who really knows how to run the economy and keep us out of major wars? I think they'd be like, okay, I'd rather have the latter. But it'd be nice to have both.
You'd rather have both, obviously.
Yeah, I'd like to have both, but
given the that's a tough call because the presidency is so important to today's economy and America.
What I'm saying is, I'm not saying he's not acting president. I think it is presidential to fight the establishment in your own party and stand up to the global elites and say, I'm calling you, what on you, on these NATO...
FDR fought the establishment in his party.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln fought the establishment in his party. Harry Truman certainly did. Ronald Reagan certainly did. And now Truman is fighting the establishment too. I suppose, I would give him a pass in a way because the establishment is even more filled with more hate and more bile and more and more nauseating comments today than, say, in the 1980s, although there were a lot of horrible things said about Reagan in the 1980s.
Oh, yeah. I mean, from all the people some of the people that are still around bloviating on
the
TV.
Washington Post.
Yeah.
The week he passed away, the Washington Post published the most horrific things the week of his funeral. In New York City government, if there's never any more evidence of the bias of the liberal establishment, the New York City government closed its offices for the passing of Franklin Roosevelt, of Harry Truman, of John Kennedy, of Lyndon Johnson, of Martin Luther King, of Robert Kennedy, but they didn't close their offices for the passing of Ronald Reagan.
Unbelievable. Craig Shirley here on the Laura Ingraham Show. Thank you so much. Stay with us. All right, Greg in Colorado, really quickly, line 2, grading the president. Greg.
Giving him a B+. Are you there?
Go ahead.
Giving him a B+. I think he's done a great job, and I think it actually is going to get better. And I also like to say, I think after about 4 years, America is going to be shocked on how well he's going to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think by 2020, the Trump coalition will be growing. He's not satisfied with having this base remain in place and just as it is. No, he wants to grow it. That's why he's touting the numbers for minority communities. And he needs to go start speaking and preach the gospel of economic nationalism, populism to these communities, and he will. This is a good time to be an American, great time to be a Republican and a conservative and a populist. We'll continue on this. Raymond Arroyo will be with us in a little bit. Stay with us.
Thanks for listening to the Laura Ingraham Show podcast. Download new episodes every week at podcastone.com. That's podcastone.com.
Here at Podcast One, we love hearing from you. We read every tweet and comment you send our way, so don't miss your chance to take our summer listener survey. Just go to podcastone.com and click on the survey banner, or go to podcastone.com/mysurvey. It only takes a few minutes, and it gives you the opportunity to make a direct impact on your favorite shows. Tell us how you really feel, so we can get to know you better. We value your thoughts and participation, so check out the survey at podcastone.com/mysurvey, or click on the survey banner on podcastone.com.
I'm Rita Foley with an AP News Minute. A new landmark study on breast cancer treatment. Shirley Smith with the findings.
The study says most women with the most common form of early-stage breast cancer can safely skip chemotherapy without hurting their chances of beating the disease.
A government report out today finds that Medicare recipients are getting fewer of those pricey brand-name prescription drugs, but they're spending more on drugs overall because drug prices are going up. Can lead Russia investigator Robert Mueller subpoena the president? No. That's presidential lawyer Rudy Giuliani's take as he tells ABC's This Week.
I still agree with that exception, which a president can go before a judge and say it's for purposes of harassment, it's unnecessary. We win that.
Solo, a Star Wars story, is still number one at the box office. But it's losing ground fast, say the film critics. I'm Rita Foley.